So, Sam, can we paint the picture? Can you just let us know a bit about you, maybe personally and professionally, so we can find out a bit more about you?
That is always the most impossible question, isn't it? Why is it that we always go, oh, you want to know about me? No, I don't do
Can't talk about that.
that. um, so yeah, I'm Sam Isles. I got married in August, so my name has changed. So some of you may know me as Sam Curtis, because obviously my business was Sam Curtis Coaching and has transitioned to Sam Isles through many a debate, which we do not have time for today.
Okay, that can be another conversation.
Yeah, that's a whole nother conversation. I have been, well, I've been a life coach. I've been running my own private practice now for nearly 4 years. Before that, I did a variety of jobs, but realistically, I've been coaching and supporting people for well over a decade. And actually, some of my first memories of coaching were when I was like 13, 14 years old. So I've always been supporting people. The reason I say over a decade is because in university, I did some NLP training. So that was kind of my first dipping my toe into that there's a world out there of personal development and what that might look like. And as I said, I did a variety of jobs. I couldn't settle anywhere. I'm a big believer in following my gut, but that tends to get me in trouble. I'm also a highly sensitive person and I'm very emotionally driven. Gut, emotions all linked together. And so I jumped around, much to the disdain of probably my parents love me, but they want me to be stable. They wanted, that traditional upbringing, that traditional pathway. And I jumped around. I was a teacher. I taught GCSE and A levels. I ran businesses for business owners and investment platforms and all sorts of weird and wonderful things. I was a professional actress for a while, so that was good fun.
Yes.
And yeah, all of that really was leading me to this. I needed to go through my own personal development journey, have my own battles with difficult bosses, with overthinking that basically ruled my entire life. I'm not fixed. I'd love to say I'm fixed. I still overthink. My husband is the most chilled out human in the world, and I am very much still at the other end of the spectrum to him. But I am 1,000 times better because I needed to go through that journey, the ups and the downs, the highs and the lows, to really figure out who I was. And so now I get to spend my days working with, in fact, I did the calculation just yesterday. I've done over 200 coaching sessions this year. And I absolutely adore working with my clients because we work on big open topics, right? We work on who am I? What do I stand for? What is my purpose? How do I improve my well-being? Because well-being, is six, if you go by Carol Riff, it's 6 psychological principles of well-being, and how do I have a life that I want? How do I live with more joy and less pain? And I always say that's great, but how do you also live with the pain? How do you live with the sadness? Because emotions are only messengers, and they are really scary when they're big or when they're intense. But actually, they're always there to help us and to guide us and keep us moving in the direction that we want to be moving in. And then more recently, I have been doing my somatic training. So I do a lot more with the nervous system. And so polyvagal theory and working with clients on that bridge between. I'm a very practical coach. I think talking about things is fantastic, but it's what you do with that information afterwards that matters. And that's where the somatic stuff I think is really important, because we can talk around emotions. We can do a lot of work in terms of embracing emotions and stuff, but to really help my clients understand why the nervous system is fundamental to that process. And so I think that is that. Oh, and I haven't talked about mindfulness at all, which of course is the whole other bit of what I do and why we're here.
Yeah, we're definitely going to be covering the mindfulness bit. As you were saying that though about I think that's the bit that I was a bit behind on, connecting the body and the mind. So doing the work on the mind stuff and then not joining it all together.
You're so right. It's so much. We can do mindset work, but we have to do body work as well. We are trained, we are led to believe that everything that's important is here on up. And actually, for more than 95% of human existence, it's here that's been the most important. This is what's kept us alive. This is what has helped us build. And I'm not saying our brains aren't important. They are fantastic. And we should never disrespect what our brains are capable of doing. but we can't just isolate to them. We need to also engage with the body and listen to what it's telling us, because quite frankly, if you don't listen, it will find a way. And so
yeah.
I threw my back out at 22 because of stress, and I felt like an 80-year-old woman, and probably there are fitter 80-year-old women than I were at 22, quite frankly. You know, and I've got various autoimmune diseases and things that are as a result of a disrespecting, or maybe not disrespecting, but ignoring the messages that were coming from my body and just relying on my brain to solve every problem.
Yes. Yeah, and I think that's really common. I think, you know, with taking that time and the mindfulness, the stopping, the resting, the pausing, it's really hard to do those things.
Yeah.
And how did mindfulness sort of come into your life?
So I have been meditating since university. So in university, in fact, I remember having a lesson in school. We did yoga classes when I was, as I say, maybe 14, 15. And I remember the teacher taking me to one side and teaching me candle gazing, a form of mindfulness, a form of meditation, even back then, because she could obviously sense and tell that there was a lot of going on in my brain, and she was even trying to help me back then. But through university, I definitely picked up more using apps like Calm and Headspace and things like that, which are amazing. And then when I started doing my private practice, I realized really quickly that a lot of the benefit I got with my clients was bringing them into the present, particularly at the beginning of the session, so that we could actually dive into what was on their mind, but in a grounded space rather than an activated space. And so I was running guided meditations with my clients one-on-one, and I thought I should train in this. This is something that, you know, warrants more exploration. And so I did my mindfulness, my meditation qualification a couple of years ago. But really, it's it's everything and nothing, in the sense of, it can, if you can build it in and you can build that relationship with the present moment, which is so I'm kind of going off the question, so I apologize.
No, go for it.
If you imagine meditation as like the umbrella term, there are lots of different ways that you can do meditation.
Yeah, and it's not all woo sitting on a hill.
No, that's beautiful.
Yeah, if you can do it, you know, great, and you want to.
Right, that's wonderful. But mindfulness is one of the pillars that comes down, if that makes sense. It's one of the terms, and we tend to use them interchangeably, which is technically incorrect, but I don't blame anyone. But mindfulness is it translates in Sati to grounded awareness. It's like grounded presence, so being here and now. And so with mindfulness, rather than me doing all the meditations and all that kind of stuff, which are great, I personally do lots of different ones, but when life is busy and hectic and we're balancing a million things, mindfulness is all we need, because it just brings us back to the here and now, which means we can tune into what we need in the here and now.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. And how have you seen the sort of positive benefits of that on your life? For anyone that maybe hasn't brought mindfulness into their lives, what are the key benefits?
So there are so many benefits with mindfulness. I mean, everyone watching probably already knows, they've probably read the articles, they know that it helps with sleep, it helps with relationships. The way, for me personally, it's been the clarity of mind. So as we know, when we're busy and we're in stress, right, when we're feeling stressed, our amygdala is basically running the show, right? We know that anyone who's in the fight or flight response or in a form of stress response, their amygdala takes over, and the prefrontal cortex, which is our decision-making part of the brain that runs all of our ability to process, and just goes down, right? We don't have access to it in the same way. And so what mindfulness has done for me is help me build that relationship between my stress response and my prefrontal cortex. So I always like the thing of, you know, when you've had an argument with a friend or a husband or partner or whatever, and you're in the shower the next day and you go, oh, I should have said,
Yeah.
Should have said, because that would have, we all have those moments. And the reason you couldn't think of that at the time is because your amygdala was running the show. You didn't have access to the rational brain. And so for me, it's having built that relationship so that when I am in stress response, I have clarity of mind so that I can then make better decisions, so that I don't have to keep going in the direction of stress. I can take a moment to just stop, even if it's just 30 seconds, just to try and bring myself back to the moment and go, do I really want to say that? Is that the right thing to say? Or am I going to cause more of an argument? Do I have to respond to this email right now because it's clearly angered me? So is now the right time to reply? And Viktor Frankl, A Man's Search for Meaning, a fantastic book, a really difficult read, but I imagine most people have. If you're interested in self-development, between stimulus and response, there is a gap. In that gap lies your freedom. And that's what mindfulness does for me. And for my clients, is it starts to build that space where we can take a pause and decide what we want to do, or what's the next step that feels in alignment with who I am.
Yes. And does that then have a sort of knock-on impact? So if you get better at finding that pause, so I, for instance, like I can easily overthink and it spirals into all different areas of life, and the overthinking is so hard to stop. And I'm just wondering, sort of, the more that you do mindfulness, the more that you find the pause, does that then touch on all sort of different parts of life, be it if you've got children, with a partner, at work? Do you see that?
Most definitely. If we can start to be more present with ourselves, we're automatically more present with those around us. And so we can build stronger relationships. The pause gives you the space to examine the thought, right? Rather than letting the brain run the show. We feel like our thoughts are in charge of us more often than not, because we're like, this, then I've got to worry about this, then what's going to be for dinner, and oh my God, the kids need that, and I didn't get that ready for school. And it's like they're just telling us what's happening. The truth is they're just a part of us. They're a useful part of us, right? Again, the brain is important, and thinking is a fantastic skill that we have as humans, but they are just one part of us. And so by creating that pause, we can start to decide, oh, what's going to be for dinner tonight? I don't need to worry about this right now because I need to deal with this first. It's like it goes, oh, well, that's not relevant. I'll come back to that later. And it gives you that space to not let them run the show, but to allow you just to almost separate yourself for a second and go, right, what do I want? What's the next thing for me to deal with in this moment? Having full faith and certainty that what you need to worry about for dinner will happen when you need to get on with it.
Yeah. And if it's a last minute decision, so be it. I mean, it's like if the kitchen's not on fire, then we have to, I guess, to some extent, we're pulled in so many different directions. It's about helping us work out what's the most important thing in that moment, rather than being caught up in the overwhelm and
Absolutely.
I'm just in my own head thinking about the power of it, because I don't know, I feel like I'm speaking to a lot of people, and we talked about this a bit before we started, that on the surface everyone looks happy and good, and yet behind closed doors, as women, we're often juggling so many things, and there's a lot of people sort of saying, yeah, I'm okay, I'm fine.
Yeah, my favorite word, fine. Feelings inside not expressed.
Which I love.
Yeah, it's so easy to say I'm fine, and actually you might truly believe that. Part of you might truly believe I'm fine because I'm used to coping with this amount of stuff, right? We can absolutely, I mean, women are incredible. We're like, so are men, but I think the amount of mental load women hold, that we are clearly designed to hold more than men, just for whatever reason. Don't ask me the science, I don't know. But the amount that we can hold at any one time, the birthdays, the presents, the kids lunch bags, you know, whatever it might be. We're holding, oh, we've got to call the mother-in-law, we need to sort this needs to happen, right? We've always got all those pieces going on. They're always in there, logged somewhere. And we can hold that. So you might genuinely believe, no, I'm fine because I'm used to this. It's Christmas. I'm always this stressed. There's always this much going on. The kids have got to have this. I've got to get the turkey ready, blah, blah, blah. Like, but it's true, feelings inside not expressed, because it means that you're not in touch with, you might be fine, you might be coping, but you're not necessarily thriving. You're not necessarily in tune with what's going on for you, and expressing the emotions or asking for help at the right times. Or, you know, as I say, women are amazing. We can just battle through almost anything, right? Pile it on, we'll just keep going. And at some point that becomes too much.
Yeah. At what cost? Yeah. What's the cost?
Exactly. Is it going to be a physical ailment? Is it going to be a breakdown in a relationship? Is it going to be big emotional outbursts? It could be anything. And yeah, so fine, feelings inside not expressed is a really good trigger when I hear it in people, whether it's friends or clients, in like, okay, what are you not saying to yourself? What are you not listening to from this body? Your brain's telling you, yep, go, go, go. We've got this. We'll just keep going. I'm holding all this stuff. We know this has got to happen. But what's this telling you? Have you had every cold going this season? Right? Because that's probably a message from your body to slow down. Right? But for everyone, it means something slightly different. And that's why our own emotions, we need to spend time with. And that can be very, very alien and very scary.
Yeah.
And I'm jumping all over the place with the way I do, but so does that sort of answer?
Yeah. And I think it is, I think maybe almost sometimes the maybe mindfulness or the pausing or the being in the moment can be a bit confronting.
And this is where I love everyday mindfulness techniques. So these are just, that's what I just call them, right?
Yeah. Tell us more about that. Yeah.
I do everyday mindfulness kind of little techniques, because, oh God, wouldn't it be nice if we all had 20 minutes a day where we could feel no shame and no guilt and just go and sit cross-legged and be nice and calm and quiet.
Yeah, and our brain just gets on board with the memo and does it.
Right? Wouldn't that be lovely? But that's not the reality that we live in. And as you've just said, sitting 20 minutes by yourself and facing what's going on, particularly if it's been years and years of repression and suppression, that's not the right way to do it. You don't want to. No one needs to have more emotional tension, right? The work I do is not about like, oh, let's have a big crying fit or a big screaming fit. It's about how do we slowly release the tension and that pressure so that the emotions aren't as big and intense, right? Because we don't need more big emotional outbursts because they're scary. They're not good for our body, our mind, or our nervous system. And so mindfulness, everyday mindfulness, are really short little practices that we can do in 30 seconds, if that's all we've got, right? If we're just jumping in the car or waiting for kids to pick up after school, or we're in a meeting and things are starting to feel a bit overwhelming, we still need to listen to the meeting, but we can have 30 seconds, right? And so, okay, let me just backtrack a little bit. So with mindfulness, it's about being present, being here in the moment. So the first thing anyone should know, and I think this is misunderstood a lot and definitely miscommunicated, is that mindfulness is not about having an empty mind at all. It would be foolish, quite frankly. We can't. We're not designed that way. The trick is to get distracted and to come back. Yeah. And I call those mental sit-ups. It's like going to the gym. You're not going to get a six-pack because you do 100 sit-ups. You're going to get a six-pack because you stick at it consistently.
Yeah. And a lot of people can get put off, can't they, when they try, and they're like, okay, why have I still got all of these thoughts running through my head? I'm not doing it right.
Exactly. And I think that's where the miscommunication is such a negative for it, because actually, in my eyes, if you're new to mindfulness and you get distracted 100 times, you've done more sit-ups than me, because I now only get distracted 5 times, right? So the more you get distracted and come back, the better you are at it. You've had a more successful mindfulness moment than I have when I've been one at the time, right? And that is challenging to get distracted, come back, and you will miss some of them. And that's fine. And that's where these techniques, or like anchors, are really helpful, because they provide the point to come back to. So should I give some examples? Would that be helpful?
Great. Yes, please. Yes.
So some of my favorites, some simple ones to do, particularly with kids enjoy these, are naming objects. So if you're feeling stressed or whatever, and an email's just come in and you just think, oh no, just name 10 things around you.
Okay.
Name 20 if you can, but it's just, I say 10 because you can sometimes do this, because then it helps you. If your mind's getting distracted a lot, at least when you pull back, you can keep account.
Okay.
So just name things. Kids love color. Get them to name 10 colors that they can see. Do a color walk. So using the color, pick a color. I'm going to go out for a 5-minute walk, and for a minute of that, I'm going to only spot the color yellow. And so, oh, I see double yellow lines. I see a daisy. I see a, right, whatever it might be. And when your mind goes, and oh, I need to worry about okay, wait, where's yellow? Where have I missed yellow? And just bring it back to that anchor point. In meetings, the other misconception I think there is with mindfulness is, or meditation in general, is that it needs to be still. Mm-hmm. We're not always designed to be still. And so finger taps, one hand, two hand, double taps, whatever, just as a point. And when you get distracted, you'll know, because you'll be like, hold on, what was I doing? Yeah. And it's okay, bring it back. Okay, just bring it back and find a rhythm that works for you. Some days I'm really quite fast, some days I'm quite slow, just based on my energy. Same with swaying. You know, my chair's going to creak like nobody's business. But some people like to go side to side. Some people like to go front to back. And just completely focusing on that movement as your anchor point. And then your brain will go off and go, okay, where am I? I want to go forward and back, or side to side. Figures of 8 with your wrists or your ankles are a good movement one as well, so that you can do that. I like to do things like to bring in kind of other tools as well. So I like to do what I call love bombs. So it's really good if you're on a bus or a train or somewhere where you're commuting and stuff, because I just mentally go around the carriage and I just compliment each person for what I can see or experience. So, oh, you're doing really well with your kids there. They're really calm and settled, or whatever. Or I really love your dress. You must have taken some time to, and they never know it's in my head, but it's a chance for me to be present and just send out some, you know.
Do you ever tell them?
I'm one of those people that will go to someone, oh my God, I do love your dress. That is beautiful on you. So if it was appropriate, I would.
Yeah.
Things like a gratitude snapshot. This is quite fun at Christmas. If there's a lot of kind of hecticness with Christmas, if the big family gatherings or whatever, is just to find a moment where you can stop and just step out of yourself effectively and take in the room mentally, and come up with 3 to 5 things that you're grateful for in that moment. And again, you could tie that with the love bombs, because you could then go around family members or whoever's in the space with you. Yeah. Affirmation. So my newest one that I came up with about a week or so ago, no, a bit longer than that, a month or so ago, is alphabet affirmations. So as a mindfulness technique, to just use the alphabet. So use the statement I am, and then A. So I am amazing, I am beautiful, I am curious, I am, and just carry on down the alphabet.
Very hard to do.
Yeah. It's a great one for building self-worth, though.
That's it. That's what I was just thinking. How often do we celebrate?
And it doesn't have to be positive. I did it with a client in a session the other day. She just had a job interview and she was feeling really very anxious about getting the answer for this job interview and whether she'd get it or not. And we went through, and N was nervous. And I was like, that's true for you, so that's perfect.
Yeah.
Right? It's true. It's not about lying to yourself. That's the opposite of what we're aiming for. We're looking at what's true in this present moment. And then just kind of rounding them off, you can use the senses. So senses are fabulous for self-care, but they're also fabulous for mindfulness. So play with opposites. What's the loudest sound I can hear? What's the quietest sound I can hear? Play with distance. What's the furthest away? What's the closest? Just name 5 things you can see, 4 things you can hear, 3 things you can touch, 2 things you can smell, 1 thing you can taste. That one's often talked about. And then one of my other favorites at the moment is there is more in this moment. I think it's potentially a bit more of an advanced one because it actually encourages your brain to think, but it's about not getting distracted. So because what the brain likes to do is it attaches to a story. So you might go, there's more of in this moment. So what's there more of in this moment? There is more light in this moment. I can feel light. Okay, so I feel light. Oh, well, why do I feel light? What's the like? No, okay, there's more in this moment. So I'm feeling light, and I can see the twinkle of Christmas tree lights to the side. Okay, what is there more of in this moment? What is also true here and now? And as I say, the mind will like to catch on to the story. So it might go, oh, but I need to turn the Christmas tree lights off because so it can be a little bit harder. But what is there more of in this moment? What is also true in this moment that I haven't noticed yet? And that's quite a fun one. As I say, I think potentially more advanced, but doesn't mean anyone couldn't start with it today and just give it a go.
And I suppose it's a willingness to give it a go. And do you think it needs to be, how do you make it a habit and make it like, do you set an alarm? Do you do a daily reminder? Because waiting for those moments where you're slipping into overwhelm or meltdown or emotional overload or something like that, that's not necessarily the time that you're going to master it.
Yeah. So this is where the coach in me is like, well, it's completely unique to you, which is true, because the things that are going to work for one person aren't necessarily going to work for another, and you might not know what works for you yet. Okay. And this is why I don't set actions with clients, I set experiments. So we experiment with it. So if a client is unsure of how to make it more routine and they don't have an idea, I might say, okay, well, what if you tied it to going to the bathroom? What if every time you got triggered to go to the bathroom, because that is a biological function, it's not within our control, it happens, we must obey. You, on the way there, on the way back, or even sat on the toilet, you did one of the mindfulness things.
Yes.
So start there. Other people like time, so they might have a favorite time, or I say, what's your favorite number between 1 and 59? And they say 7. I'm like, great. So anytime you see 6, 7, or 8 in the second hand of your clock, so digital I'm talking about here, do a mindfulness. And a lot of them, similar to what you're saying about, well, actually the opposite of what you're saying that it's not the time to master it when you're in that overwhelm, and I completely agree. They are incredibly valuable then if you can notice and do, fantastic. But a lot of clients say, well, I only need it then. Right. And I'm like, no, what we're doing is training so that the space is always there. Yeah. They are great tools for stress and overwhelm. Of course they are, and for overthinking. But what we want to do from a nervous system perspective is validate the good that we're in. So if you see the time 7 on a clock and that's your number, but you're like, oh no, I'm really happy, I'm having a great time, do it then anyway. Because what you do is you reinforce that this is the feeling that you want. So you start to reprogram your nervous system to say, this is what we like, this is where we want to be. And so it is incredibly important to do it not only as a tool to bring you down from overwhelm, overthinking, but also to, during good times, to help your nervous system go, yes, this is where I want to be. And so we build more of that up rather than, and we spend more time in ventral vagal rather than stressful.
And potentially start to notice it more rather than maybe get to the end of the week and only remember the more tricky things rather than those moments where we were feeling happier or lighter or joyful.
Yeah, and it's about that space again, isn't it? It's about building that space so that you have, as you say, awareness. So you probably already know this, but we have a part of the brain called the reticular activating system, the RAS. And the RAS job is to act as a filter. You know, we are constantly bombarded with lots of stimulus and lots of data. Like I can probably say to most of the people watching, what temperature are you? And they'll be like, what? Because we don't acknowledge it. But if they're cold, because I'm starting to get a little bit cold, I'm aware of my temperature because it's at the extremes. So my body is now going, well, my RAS is going, you must notice you are cold because I need you to take a step. I need you to do something to help me come back to homeostasis. And so that part of the brain is constantly filtering data. And it's one of the most powerful things we can do, but is to show the brain what we want more of, because the brain is a self-fulfilling prophecy. So if you're always saying everything's really tough, everything's really difficult, I can't cope, I can't do it, you will find more evidence to prove that things are tough and things are difficult.
Yeah.
Whereas if you can say things are tough for me right now, but I'm so grateful for, your brain goes, oh, okay, so you want that information too. And it will start showing you the things that you're grateful for. But it's one of those that it's like rolling down a hill. You've got to give it some momentum before it takes over and does it automatically.
Yeah. It's not a quick fix. It's not going to do it once and that's it. It's the practice and the habit. And what sort of reasons do clients come to you? Like, what's sort of behind, or they might come for one reason and then you discover the reason behind it?
Yeah. So because my work is so kind of varied, I don't have like a clean answer to this, which I know people like. But people tend to feel stuck. That's a really common word. They tend to be high achievers, but high achievers who are now like, well, what's next? What do I do now? They tend to be overthinkers. They tend to have a lot of overwhelm, a lot of anxiety, a lot of kind of stress as kind of the outward symptoms, if that makes sense, things that they're aware of. And it's that frustration of being stuck that tends to motivate them into having a conversation with me. What we do behind that is incredibly varied. So it might just be nervous system work. Like if anxiety is running the show, then for me, there's not a lot of point in doing mindset work. I'm sure they're more than capable of changing their perspective on things, but their nervous system isn't in a place. They don't feel safe enough to. Yeah. So we'll do a lot of that. If it's a lot of, as I said before, is around well-being. So it's just around looking at the elements of well-being, which again is a very broad term, but looking at which ones could do with some more attention for ourselves. It might be simple things like looking at the 7 types of rest and where gaps are and just filling those gaps for a little while. I'm working with a client at the moment who phrases it as figuring out the jigsaw puzzle of myself. So it's a lot of purpose work and who am I and what are my values and what drives me and how do I start making decisions in the right direction, because what I've done clearly hasn't got me where I want to be. So how do I know myself enough to make the next decisions? I do a lot of work on boundaries because I think they're missing in a lot of, and people are worried to say, I need to set a boundary, and they don't necessarily know how to set a boundary. And again, it can be uncomfortable. So yeah, I do a whole range of things.
Yeah. And you touched upon it there a bit about you mentioned rest. And I think that's something, particularly at this time of year. What do you what do you see when it comes to women in particular and rest, or what should we know when it comes to rest? Why does it feel so hard? Or is that just me?
No, trust me, you are not alone. You are absolutely not alone in finding rest hard. I literally do this for a living and I still find rest hard. I was ill last week or the week before, and I spent a day in bed, which is just like the guilt and the shame that wanted to come in and creep in. And it was like, I am sick, I need to rest. My body is asking for this rest. And yet there's still a voice in my head that wants to go, no, get up and do something, be useful. And I think that voice is in all of us because of society. Now, whether that voice is our mums, our partners, teachers, or whatever, it still come from this collective that society says that to be valuable, we need to be productive. And I have so many issues with that. But that's a conversation for another day. So firstly, if you're ever worried about not feeling like rest is valuable, it absolutely is. And it's not your fault that you think that way, because you alone as an individual are trying to fight years of a battle that is set by millions of people. So first and foremost, have compassion for yourself for feeling that way, because it's not your fault. But in terms of embracing rest and embracing the right kinds of rest, because again, there can be this assumption that, I slept last night, so that's all the rest I need.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Physical rest is so important. right? That going to bed, having a good night's sleep is absolutely important. But there's also other types of physical rest, like yoga, stretching, massage, acupuncture, anything that allows your physical body to calm down and have a moment of rest is physical rest. But that's one of 7.
Yeah.
Right. And so sometimes you're not going to want to go for a walk or have a nap or do something that's for your physical rest, because it might be one of the other 6 that's at play. And this is where I always forget one. We have emotional rest as well. So this is, sorry. So emotional rest is any time that we can be true and present with our true emotions. So this might be having therapy, counseling, coaching. This might be a good gossip down the pub with your best friend, right? It might be chatting to your husband about the stresses of the week, but any chance you get in a safe space to share what's true for you is a form of emotional rest. We also have mental rest. So mental rest is that mental load that we were talking about earlier, and finding ways to calm that inner chatter effectively, to take time away from that. So that might be watching a Christmas film. It might be zoning out in front of the TV, and that's fine. If that helps switch your brain off, if you're just watching the film and it's not chattering away, then that's great. But it might be the mindfulness techniques. It might be spending a minute just naming objects around the room and using that just to stop that chatter. My partner, he is a big fan of tennis, and that for him is mental rest, because he is only focused on that ball. That is a chance, no matter how stressful a week he's had, when he's on that court, he is focused and he is giving himself mental rest, even though it's the opposite of physical rest.
Yeah.
So he will feel better after a game of tennis than he would have if he'd had a nap.
Yes.
Right? Because it's the mental rest that his brain was after, not physical rest. We also have creative rest, and kids are really good for this, but adults less so. We forget that we need to stimulate our problem solving. So we spend most of our days in work trying to solve problems and think about things intellectually, but we actually need to give that part of our brain some creative rest. So that might be going back to things that you did as a child, painting, arts, things like that. It might be crosswords. It might be Sudokus. I'm a big murder mystery fan, so I like to read murder mystery novels or have those books where you've got to solve puzzles and things like that. That helps my brain come away from the day-to-day problem solving and focus on something, and resets my problem solving and gives me creative rest. We need sensory rest. So if anyone out there listening is a HSP like me, so a highly sensitive person or an empath, those two terms tend to overlap. This one we know well, and a lot of other people don't. But it's getting away from anything that is overly stimulating in terms of our senses. And for those that don't find things as overly intense, like we have lights in our ceiling, we never turn them on. It is too much for me. I cannot have bright overhead lights at all. Just doesn't work for me. So I always have lamps and stuff like that. So that's one way I honor my sensory rest. But other people can honor it by trying different cuisines, trying different foods, trying different textures, buying a new candle that has a different scent and enjoying that and giving your senses a different smell. I think that's why Christmas is so good, because we have so many happy memories attached, like the smell of pine needles and cinnamon and all the Christmas candles and stuff. So Christmas automatically gives us a form of sensory rest, because we get the glittery lights, we get the cold, so we get like the jumpers and all that kind of stuff, and which changes up our sensory experience. So that's sensory. We have social and spiritual left. So social rest it's not necessarily about spending time alone, right? For introverts, that might be the case. It might be, actually, I just need to take some time away and have some alone time. But social rest can also be spending time with people that you feel super connected with. So again, your best friend, your partner, your kids, anywhere where you can show up as yourself rather than having to put on a role, which we all have to do in the office with certain friendship groups, book clubs, things like that. We have to show up. We want to show the best version of ourselves, and we want to be appropriate for that situation. And sometimes we can spend too much in that, and we need to spend time with those people where we can be our messy selves, whatever that looks like for ourselves. And as I say, for some, that's time alone. It really depends where you fall on the introvert-extrovert scale. And lastly, spiritual. And again, I think Christmas is good for this. because of the magic in the air more than anything. But it might be spiritual as in a connection to religion or to the universe, if whatever people have. But it's also connection with something more than us. So it might be community groups, it might be volunteering and things like that, where you're having an experience. In St. Albans, we have the cathedral, and I defy anyone to walk in there and particularly look at the rose window and not have a feeling of like, wow, there is something bigger than me in this world, because it's absolutely stunning. And just that vastness that was created and built so long ago, it shows there's something more. And so that even that feeling of awe, creating that feeling of awe, whether it's St. Albans Cathedral or whether it's the Grand Canyon, is a way of kind of having that spiritual rest. Cool. Did I miss any?
I wouldn't know, Sam, but I think you've covered everything there. And that's just really interesting, because you can get hung up on I need to be resting in a particular way, or getting X amount of hours sleep. But sometimes you can have the sleep and still not feel rested at the end of it.
And because it's not the physical rest that matters. I had one client who so generally I have sessions every 2 weeks. And within that time frame, she was like a different person, because she'd started going to church again. She'd stopped going every Sunday, and we talked about the different types of rest, and she was working on a few of them, but she said fundamentally just being back in that community was such just a lift for her, because she just hadn't connected with that side of herself and given herself that rest in so long. And that worked for her. Other people, it's the excuse to play, to get involved with creative things, whether it's making wreaths at Christmas, decorating the tree, that can just be enough creative rest just to recharge us for a month, a year, whatever.
Because that's what's running through my head. It's almost as though the word rest doesn't quite do it justice.
It's the misconception that rest is being still. Rest is doing nothing. Well, it's not actually about doing nothing.
No.
It's about doing something that restores you.
Yes, that's it. It feels like the nourishing, the nurturing, the making yourself more the center of things, which we don't do very much. Yes, I love that. Right, I've just realized I haven't been looking at Facebook at all. Sorry, people on Facebook. Let me have a little refresh. Dun, dun, dun.
Gosh, yes, there's so much going through my mind about like, oh, and this and that, and but I think this season is lovely for rest, for restoration for us all.
Yes, thank you to the people that are watching. And for those, this is just triggered by one of the comments there about people that do struggle to sort of get out of their head. We've talked about a lot, but what would be maybe your sort of, it's a busy time of year, that all of this stuff might help you. What do you think would sort of be up there in the thing to try and do for the next few weeks? So maybe get out of your head.
It's a great question, and again, I don't have a single answer, because I mean maybe one single answer, but this is doing more, which we don't need to do more, but I offer a free session. So if anyone wants me to answer that question for them personally,
brilliant,
please just go onto my website and book a free session. That's absolutely fine. It can be in January if now is too crazy, but that personalized one-to-one is the best thing I can offer. But in terms of, I quite like a thing called a handful of stories. I make up all sorts of weird names for techniques. And the handful of stories is one that I use with overthinking clients a lot, because it helps us break away from the story without disregarding the brain. So what's a good example? I always use the dating example, but that's not very Christmassy. So I'm going to use the dating example because it's the one that comes to mind. But so when we're overthinking, we tend to have a story. So it's like, oh my God, he's not texting me back.
Yeah.
That must mean he doesn't like me. That must mean right? And we get down this, and then it's like, well, if he doesn't like me, then I'm never going to find love, and we spiral, right? And it's a yucky feeling. Whereas if you can stop and make up 5 different stories, so it's okay, yeah, it might be true he's not texting you back because he doesn't like you. It could also be true that he's dropped his phone down the side of the train. It could also be true that he's currently swimming with sharks. It could also be true that, right? And just make up 5. And the more silly, the better.
Yeah.
Right? Because anytime we laugh, we release, good hormones that just make it settle a bit.
Yeah.
And so it's respecting that the brain wants to make stories, but it's not allowing it to trap on any one story and spiral. Yeah. So it just allows. So if it's like, I'm never going to get all this done in true. Well, that's true. But what also could be true, that it might not all be perfect. And then, oh my God, I'm not perfect. Oh, right. It could also be true that some fairy is going to come down and help me do all of this, yes. Right? It could be true. It might not be likely, but it could be true. It could also be true that I could ask my friend to help me with X, or maybe I could ask a friend to pick up my kids from school that day so that I can do X, right? And just using that to pause for a moment, allow your brain to do what it wants to do, make up stories, but have ones that are hopefully silly or more helpful than the spiral that our negativity bias can create.
Yeah. And I imagine, does that then help maybe break some of the patterns, that if some of those, and maybe even help us notice some of the thought patterns, if they've been going on for years, showing up in different ways?
Yes, absolutely. And anyone interested in self-development will not just stop there. Their analytical mind will go, oh, that was
thinking ahead.
I was thinking that, and I was thinking. But for me, so first thing is always awareness, right? How do I bring awareness to the pattern that is no longer useful to me? It served its purpose. It's not a bad thing that happened. It's not a bad habit. It's not a bad process. It's been protecting. It's done me some good. But how do I bring awareness to it now? How do I stop and go, oh, that's interesting. I'm overthinking right now. The next thing is self-compassion. It's okay that I'm feeling this way. It's okay that my brain wants to overthink. I can be grateful that my brain is capable of thinking. And then it's saying, I want to change this. I want to do something different now. This pattern no longer serves me in the way that it used to. But that self-compassion piece is really important. And that's part of mindfulness in a way as well, because stopping for a moment and just going, you know what, I'm angry, and that's okay. I can feel angry in this moment. My kid is screaming and the shops aren't doing this and this isn't happening. And I'm angry and I'm stressed.
Yeah.
And that's okay. This is a situation in which I respect that it's okay to be angry and stressed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, what do I want to do?
Yes. Yeah, because those emotions, the positive and the negative, they exist, they're part of us. And pretending we don't feel angry or sad doesn't really help us in the long term.
Well, it dulls everything, right? If we're successful at repressing and suppressing emotions, we learn to repress and suppress them all. I've said a few times emotions are scary, and I use that language because I know that's what people think.
Or
emotions aren't actually scary.
Yeah.
Emotions are just physical sensations in the body. So it's just like having a rumbly tummy, you're not necessarily scared because your tummy rumbles that you're going to die of hunger, right? You notice that your stomach's rumbled and you go, oh God, I didn't have lunch. I should probably have had some food, right? It's just a physical sensation. So it might be sweaty palms. It might be a racing heartbeat. It might be tension in the neck and shoulders. But that's all emotions are. They are energy in motion. They are symptoms in the body. What starts to make them scary is that they obviously get sent up via the RAS, right? So again, if we're repressing and suppressing, the RAS just doesn't even let us experience them, which is why we can end up with so much tension in our shoulders until we get neck pain that we haven't even realized is there, because the RAS has gone, well, you're not listening to that part, so there's no point even acknowledging it. But they get sent up, and if they get received by the brain goes, I don't know what this is because I don't have capacity for language. In this part of the part that receives the physical sensations doesn't have capacity for language. So it goes on this real quick run around the brain to find a story. Because once it finds a story, it can say, I'm feeling fear, I'm feeling stress, I'm feeling anxious. because then it gives it a feeling word. It finds a word that we can then relate to, and then we go, oh my God, I'm feeling so stressed.
Yeah.
But sweaty palms, like butterflies in the stomach and a racing heartbeat, could also be excitement, right? They're just symptoms. But if the brain goes up and finds that negative story and that, oh my God, it just means the world's ending and this is really hard, and that might be accurate at times, I am feeling stressed, but it might also be, it needs to find some of the other stories too and go, wow, I'm just really excited about this. This is fun. Like, it's going to be hard work, this project at work, to close it by Christmas. I have no idea how I'm going to achieve that. But won't it be great when we do? That would be awesome, right? And so feelings are scary, but emotions, they're just symptoms. They're just things that happen that we can move through. If people, in fact, I've got one other tool, if we've got time, that might be supportive for people over this Christmas period. And it tends to be one of my go-to tools with most clients when I first start working with them, particularly around emotions. And it's called release writing. So it's sort of like free flow writing, but you set a timer for 2 minutes. You start the piece of paper with, I'm feeling sad, angry, frustrated, pissed off, whatever it might be true for you. Hit go on the timer and just scribble. Just try and keep up with your brain. You won't be able to. And as I say to my clients, if your brain goes into panic mode and you're blank, just write, why is Sam making me do this? This is ridiculous. I don't know what I'm doing. This is a waste of time. Just keep writing for the 2 minutes. When the timer goes off, destroy that bit of paper. Just destroy it. Don't read it again. It's not about grammar. It's not about making sense, because it won't make sense. Because if you've tried to keep up with your brain, you're not going to be correct. It's just going to jump all over the place. And if you want to do it again with a different emotion, if they feel there are two, fine, do it again for another 2 minutes. You don't need to do it longer than that. The reason for that is the research has shown that to process emotions, physical symptoms, we only need 90 seconds. That's it. The problem is the story. So once it goes up to the brain makes a story, the brain then recreates the emotion, right? So instead of it being signal this way and up, it's now coming down. So we watch a TV show, the pet dog dies, we feel sad. That's okay. That's a perfectly legit thing. Oh, I feel sad that the dog has died. And then the brain goes, oh, but what if my dog died? Oh, my pet dog died. And it just recreates those physical symptoms over and over again. So by just setting a timer for 2 minutes and just scribbling, whenever things feel a bit much, can just help to process that, give your body the 90 seconds it needs to release it. And then you should have a little bit more clearer on the mind.
Oh gosh, Sam, I could keep talking to you for a long time. I'm loving this.
Well, you know where I am.
Yeah. Oh, it's funny that you you use the dating example, because that does seem to relate to some of our members. So yeah, that's it. Whether it's work, family, kids, men, there's always some triggers for us, aren't there?
Absolutely. And there always will be in life. This isn't, my job is not to fix anyone. I can't. It's not possible. My job is to help people over the time that we work together to learn the tools and to learn their own way of building tools so that they can go off and do it themselves.
Yeah.
So that whatever life throws at them next, they don't go, oh, I must do this one specific thing. It's like, okay, when I feel like this, how do I do that? Or, okay, Sam has said we need to, okay, well, I haven't actually been and spoken to this person in a while, or I haven't done this form of rest, and it's just that ability to notice, give the self-compassion, and then choose a different action step.
Yes. Yeah. Have that toolkit ready. Oh, I love it. Sam, how can people spend more time with you? Either work with you or do more mindfulness with you? What are the options?
Yeah, so I feel like we went completely off piece with lots of different things. So from a mindfulness perspective, if people are curious about the mindfulness techniques, I'm a teacher on Insight Timer. So they can just search Sam Isles on Insight Timer and they'll find me. That's a free app that they can use. So all my tracks on there are free. I also, midday on a Monday, I do a live where we do 3 different techniques together. So I introduce a few just to see where people are at. And then I set a coaching question for the week just to get people's minds thinking. And on a Friday at midday, I do one technique. So we spend a bit longer doing it together to kind of ground out our week. And we do gratitudes as well. So we look at what we're grateful for. So if people are keen on exploring that, they can just join me on one of those. In terms of all the rest of the things I do, my website is the best place. So everything is at sam-isles.com. And then I tend to be reasonably active on LinkedIn rather than other social media platforms. But I'm a talker, if you can't tell. My job is to have conversation.
I like talkers.
And so I do offer those free sessions. So I'm more than happy for anyone to book in for that. No sales pitch, can't be bothered with that nonsense. You know what you need. It's not my job to tell you what you need and what to spend money on. But feel free to have the free session if there's just one thing or two things on your mind. And you want to have that in-depth conversation. If you've got, like, if you're listening to this and you're like, oh, but I want to know a little bit more about that one thing, drop me an email. Yeah. Or just come say hi, and I'll message you if necessary. We'll swap numbers and I'll WhatsApp note you, because voice notes are sometimes easier to explain than email, but I'll do my best to keep it on email or whatever. But all my contact details are on the website. So
perfect. Well, I'm going to put all of your links in to this video, and I've loved chatting. I really have, Sam. I've fallen off the mindfulness wagon a little bit myself lately, so I feel like you've inspired me to go back and revisit a lot of that. So thank you, and thank you for your time.
Just play around with the ones that you enjoy. You will want different things on different days. Some days you'll want a bit of movement, so a figure of 8 will feel good. Other days stillness will be calling, and actually want something really simple, so you just connect to the rhythm of the breath and count them in and out, right? It really depends on your mood on the day, so there's no one right way of doing it. So experiment, play around, and enjoy it the best you can, even when it's difficult and your mind's off and back. Know that that's a positive. If you do it 3 times and stop, well done you. You've done it 3 more times than you would have done. So
yes,
highly recommend. And obviously I hope to see you guys at next events and stuff like that.
Yes, I'd love to have you involved. And if you have joined us today, thank you very much. I will be sharing the recording, so if you are watching on catch up, give us a little message. And thank you for your time. Thank you, Sam. I am going to say goodbye to those of you that are watching